1916, women, social change. These are the things I think that should be top of our agenda now. Well, when I was in primary school, in 6th class, we did 1916 and we did the heroic narrative, and my teacher was really into it, and you know how it had founded the Irish state and how all of the freedoms that we had now were caused by the men who rose up in the streets, and it was, you know, and he very much linking it to a kind of Christian story as well. Then when I was 13, I moved to England, and I started doing history classes there, and 1916 became a tiny half a paragraph in the history textbook, because obviously the history textbook there was all about the First World War, and I was like a little girl kind of going, hang on a second, what about like the glorious leaders and the men who were executed and so on, and my history teacher had no time for it. So I suppose what 1916, that's my strongest impression, that I learned at a very early age that history is completely relative, and that history changes depending on where you are, and that the certainties of history aren't in fact certain at all, and that 1916, whereas in Ireland, in school I had been, you know, the First World War wasn't really mentioned except that the British Army was elsewhere doing something else. Irish soldiers fighting in the British Army were not mentioned at all. So I think it's, you know, to think about how that story has then developed within Ireland is really important, and how it has started to become more amalgamated with a European history. So we can think of 1916 and the Easter Rising in the context of Europe and the First World War, and then also, you know, that British audiences are maybe more familiar with what Easter 1916 means, just as Irish audiences are more familiar with what July 1916 meant, not just for British people but for Irish people as well. So I think it's really positive now the way the story has changed, and started to become more inclusive, and started to become more, I think, responsive to the various ways that people experienced history at that time. I suppose, again, because of my schooling, I had a really strong grounding in, you know, a nationalist, simplistic version or narrative that you get when you're 12 years old in school, and then I got nothing. And I came back to college, and I was really determined to do Irish culture in university, and still am. Here I am teaching Irish theatre as a career, as a job, which is great. And one of the things that's important to me now in teaching theatre is to think about being a bit more inclusive, and so actually to move away from the way my version of 1916 was shaped, and to try and provoke students of mine, current generations, to shape their own narrative in a way and go and find out what they want to find. So I would say that in some ways my 1916 narrative was shaped by absence, and then I had to go and fill that gap myself. Again, I work in theatre, so the top thing on my mind has to be waking the feminists. So in October, the Abbey Theatre launches their 2016 programme called Waking the Nation, and lo and behold, there is a virtual total exclusion of women, whether you're talking about playwrights, whether you're talking about producers and directors, and also inevitably actors, since male playwrights tend to write male-dominated or exclusively male plays. That's not to say that some of the plays the Abbey have chosen aren't, you know, which is written by a man and directed by a man, cannot be really important for women. So Plan the Stars by Sean O'Casey would be a prime example of a great play that maybe the Abbey could have sold to us as being about putting women in the 1916 Rising front and centre. But they didn't, because they claim gender blind. There is a kind of a commemorative blindness and a social blindness going on there. And if commemoration is as much about the present as it is about the past, then unfortunately the Waking the Nation programme said something not great about Ireland in the present if it's meant to be a reflection of our society now. Women are 51% of the population, and they were 10% of the Abbey programme. So in response, a group of women and men have started pioneering this Waking the Feminists movement, which has had huge groundswell of support, which just shows commemoration is important, and now is the moment. Have started to, I think the best thing I can say about it is not only has it galvanised people and given a voice to a lot of people who are not working for equal pay or equal rights within the Irish arts community in general, but has started now to influence policy. So if we learn anything, right, from being rebellious, from raising your voice, from saying no to oppressive regimes, not that I want to make the Abbey out to be the oppressive regime here, but a kind of Irish social attitude towards excluding women in general from the story of 1916. So if we want to learn something from that, I think we can look at the Waking the Feminists movement, which is now going into the Arts Council, rewriting Arts Council policy, creating a gender policy for the Abbey Theatre, talking to the Department of Arts, Culture and the Gaeltacht, and doing the same for them. So 1916, women, social change, these are the things I think that should be top of our agenda now.